My name is James Thornock. I'm an intern at the Houston History Magazine. I'm here with Chief Rodney West, and we're here for the Houston History Archives. Please state your full name.
My name is Rodney West.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Houston in December of '69.
All right.
Yeah.
What area?
South side of town.
Okay.
I was raised in Sunnyside and went to Houston Public Schools.
Oh, perfect. That's
Sure.
right. So the next question is about your life growing up, so go into that.
Growing up, for me, was fairly normal. My father was a pastor.
Oh, yeah.
Of a church,
I don't know
yes.
how normal that is.
My mother, well, for me, it was only normal that I knew. My mother, after I was born, she didn't work outside of the home anymore, other than maybe assisting with parties and stuff like that. But there were 7 of us, and I was the youngest, so
No kidding.
for her to work would have been probably not so efficient. So she was home, took care of us and my dad. She managed the home, and he was the breadwinner, so to speak.
Yeah.
But our family was always extended by him being a pastor.
Yeah, that would have to be. I'm the oldest of 7.
Are you?
And my mom stayed at home as well.
Okay.
Off the record, but yeah, so I know.
Yeah.
It takes
Yeah.
a little bit of work.
It takes a little bit of work with 7 kids.
This is a personal question, did your older siblings help raise you? Was
My
that a
older
part of
sibling,
it?
well, it wasn't necessarily a requirement. My sister is the oldest, and she's the only girl.
Oh, okay.
So I think she had a part in raising all of us. But the age difference between her and I is 18 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was like having a second mother.
Yeah.
It wasn't long after I was born, she moved out on her own and stuff like that. So
Sometimes that's useful when you gotta take care of a whole congregation. What denomination?
at the time, it was Antioch Baptist Church growing up.
Okay.
And my father, along with the elders of the church, actually changed the name to Southeast Community Church
Okay.
sometime in the 80s. And the rationale was to be more biblical. It was
Okay.
about, the Christian faith and the location opposed to the denomination. And in the New Testament, you have the church at Corinth, the church at Ephesus, Philippi.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
always location-based. So
Yeah.
he wanted to bring the church a little bit closer to the faith. So that's what he named it, Southeast Community Church.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, because in theory, it's supposed to be all one church, right?
Sure,
Just the
sure.
different
It's just the location that makes a
We
difference.
need to talk later.
Okay.
Did you? Let's see. So where did you go to high school? Same
Okay.
area?
I went to Worthing High School. When I graduated Worthing High School, I actually had a scholarship to University of Houston, and I was studying pharmacy.
Oh yeah.
It just didn't work out for me well initially. I guess I wasn't ready for that transition. And the opportunity at that time came, or someone told me about the fire department.
Okay.
And an opportunity to get into the fire department. But I had to pay for my own training through Houston Community College.
Okay.
So I graduated in '88 from Worthing, and then I was actually in the Army Reserves, and there was a program called Split Option Training. So in the '80s, we didn't think a war was going to happen. I knew the Cold War was coming to an end, but I didn't know all these things were going to happen in the Middle East. I convinced my parents to allow me to get into the Army Reserve in the Split Option program as a junior in high school.
Okay.
So after my junior year, I went to basic training, came back and finished my senior year at Worthing. And in the summer after my senior year, I had to go to what they call advanced individual training in the Army. And after that, I came back and started at U of H for a year. I went there 1 year, and then I started HCC for the Fire Training Academy.
And who introduced you to the fire department and the idea of
So
it?
at the time, there was a member at my church who was in recruiting for the Houston Fire Department,
Okay.
and it was Herbert Sims.
Okay.
So other members of the church had joined the fire department, through the information that he passed on. So passed it on to me. I thought it sounded good, and the interesting thing, or I guess the most attractive thing at the time, was the promotional system. I had always done well on tests in school, and I was told that, hey, to promote in the fire department, it's a competitive test, and no one can hold you back except for you. So that's why I came, and I'm still here.
That's cool.
One of the reasons I came, at least.
Saving lives and saving
Saving
souls.
lives, saving souls, yeah.
That sounds great. Man, I just want to talk to you on a personal basis. So your desire for the department, did you value it because you knew you could advance, you knew you'd do well, or you had faith that you would, or what was the
I think
name
it's a
of it?
combination.
Okay.
Knowing that I could excel and knowing that I could help people. I mean, you're kind of raised helping people.
Yeah.
And this was an opportunity to get paid for doing something you like to do anyway. And I think the things that you'll do for free, you can really make a lot of money at if you just keep applying the same passions. And for me, it's been rewarding, and I'm still here, and it's still rewarding. As I've progressed through the department, you wind up helping at a different stage or a different level, but
Right.
the opportunity always exists to help people.
Good. I think people should apply that in every job
Yeah.
situation. So then, what training did you have? And you said HCC, right?
Yeah, so Houston Community College, they train you for fire and EMT.
Okay.
My first few months in the fire department, I actually started in paramedic school as well. I started the fire department in April. After a couple of months, I actually started paramedic school while I was on the job.
Okay.
However, Desert Shield and Storm took place in 1990. The same year I got into the department. So in November of 1990, I was deployed for Operation Desert Shield under first President Bush. And I was deployed and gone for 6 or 7 months. When I came back, I wasn't so interested in the paramedic piece anymore, so I didn't do paramedic, but I maintained my EMT certification in the fire department. And since then, the training that I've received with fire department, there has been some mandatory classes. There was a movement for National Incident Management classes, so there were a lot of NIMS, somewhat continuing education classes. But there was a particular program that I entered. It was called the Carl Holmes Executive Development Institute training, and it's leadership training for firefighter managers. Okay. And it was like a 7-year program. You go once a year for a week to, at the time, Dillard University. It was really great exposure. I think maybe I received more from the exposure to the individuals that were teaching. They had leaders from all over the country of departments that would come in as instructors. It was a really relaxed environment, and I think I learned a lot from that, way beyond the years that I had in the department at the time. Okay. And I did continue education with Houston Community College for certification as a firefighter technician safety. I've also taken some more classes at U of H in leadership program.
I know you're the right person to interview.
You think so?
I think, yeah, I really do.
Yeah.
I'll actually want to get back to the leadership stuff.
Okay.
More in detail, but at the end of the interview.
Okay, that's fine.
I was going to ask one thing about your service in the military.
Okay.
Did you have any opportunity to be of any service, or did you have any medical practice?
In the military, no.
Okay.
My unit was a engineering company.
Oh, okay.
And my MOS, or my job title, was carpentry and masonry. Okay. Even though I didn't build anything while I was there, I did get the training. Okay. The company that I served with, 808 Engineers, we laid a supply line for fuel from King Fahd Airport in Saudi Arabia up towards the front lines where we were fighting in Kuwait. So most of my time was spent out there doing that, and I never had to use any of my EMT training while in the military.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure.
No
that
problem.
We weren't overlooking anything. So when did you officially begin working in the Houston Fire Department and in EMS?
It was April of 1990, joined the Houston Fire Department. And at the time, everyone had to get EMT training. So when you joined the fire department, you were actually part of EMS. My full-time job was not on an ambulance every day, but even as first responders, especially in the station that I worked in, we got a lot of experience with EMS calls.
And what station was that?
That was Station 46. It's
Okay.
in Southeast Houston, Scott and the Loop, just inside the Loop on Scott Street.
That would,
Yeah. So it was really good. Initially, as a firefighter, you're assigned to a heavy apparatus, and depending on the stations you enter, some of them have what we call basic life support ambulances that have 2 EMTs. At Station 46, it was a medic unit. So we had an EMT driver and a paramedic who would be in charge of patient care. So there were a lot of days that I did drive the paramedic. And then once I promoted to chauffeur, which is an everyday position of driving, I drove the medic at the same station for a while.
And what were those trips like?
Oh, I guess a lot like today. We received a lot of calls, some serious, and sometimes they weren't so serious. Sometimes it could even be frustrating. But putting it into perspective, the calls were job security. People needed our help, so we went.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it would be a call that, a toothache at 2:30 in the morning. It's not a lot that the hospital's going to do for you, but they call the ambulance,
Yeah.
and we responded. And I've gone on some very serious calls, cardiac arrest and strokes and things of that nature, anaphylactic shock. And also some not so serious, my baby won't stop crying calls. So you get to see a lot. You experience the life of other people, because when you make these calls and they have an emergency situation, they're not coming to a hospital where you don't see their environment. You actually go to their environment and see how they're living with the emergency. And what you often can identify, sometimes socioeconomic conditions lead to people calling EMS. And I think a lot of that is attributed to maybe the county we're in. I don't know where we fall now, Harris County statistically, as far as insured citizens, but we used to be pretty bad off. And thinking that trend hasn't changed much. And that may lead to a little bit more use of emergency medical services, because people aren't going to the doctor regularly, or they don't have a doctor to go to regularly. And when things manifest themselves, it's usually in the worst way if you haven't been, taking care of yourself. So the emergency medical service in Houston is vital, being the largest part of Harris County.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the time that you started in April of 1990 to now, how have you seen the roles of the firefighters, the EMTs, and the paramedics change over the course of time? I know that training has to do with it, but...
Yeah, so we have always had the response on the heavy apparatus for EMS calls. What's happened in the last, since 2011, is our approach is to send apparatus, a heavy apparatus out on initial calls, and we probably roll a little bit more on initial calls. One of the reasons for that is everyone on the truck is trained to the emergency medical technician basic level, meaning that they can perform the same skills that the 58, I think it is, BLS units that we have can perform. Instead of getting 2 EMTs, you get 4. Mm-hmm. The weakest link in our triage and treatment of emergency medical calls is the caller. Calling, trying to explain exactly what's going on. Sometimes they can be very detailed, and sometimes not. Usually if they're calling, most people, it's the worst day of their lives. And we're asking them to tell us where they are. We're asking them to tell us what's going on, and they feel like that's a waste of time. We just need you to get here. What we found in our emergency medical system is we probably only transport a little less than 50% of the people that call. So when we do get a call and there's very limited information, we'll send those 4 closest EMTs or the 2 closest EMTs if an ambulance is close to go to do a little bit better assessment than we received on the phone. And from there, they may call for an ambulance. They may be able to mitigate the situation. The caller may refuse service, or sometimes we have a program called Ethan where we get them in touch with a doctor, sort of a teleconference with video or video conference. The doctor will evaluate, will give them the vital signs, and a decision may be made. Yes, they need to go to the hospital, they need to make an appointment with their doctor, or they can follow up with their doctor. So in that regard, emergency medical services changed. Now when it comes to paramedicine, they've made some more advances from when I was in the station. I mean, we would intubate and give certain drugs, but now they do intubate, they do give certain drugs, and maybe even a little bit more sophisticated drugs, especially when it comes to stroke and treating other seizures and things like that. So they've made more advances as we've learned more, and doctors have been more comfortable allowing people at the paramedic level to apply certain interventions into whatever medical emergency may be going on. There have been a lot of advances with that. In our city, because we have a medical center that's in close proximity to a lot of places, we may not do as much as others, but we have access to really good medical facilities in a fairly short time frame. Mm-hmm. One other big change we've seen is we've partnered with the University of Texas for what we call a stroke medic unit. And this ambulance basically is a rolling CAT scan. Yeah. So the pilot program involved if there's a stroke within a 3-mile radius of the medical center, we would contact this unit and they could meet us on the scene to perform a CAT scan. And the reason they do that is there are certain drugs that if you identify that a stroke is of a certain type of clot opposed to a bleed, this drug is amazing at reversing the effects of a stroke and shortening the rehabilitation time exponentially. So that's another advance that I've seen with EMS, just partnering with the private sector or even public medical institutions when they're trying to test out different things. And I've seen a lot of that. We've tested monitors, we've tested automatic defibrillators, we've tested different types of maybe backboards or stretchers, and I've seen a lot of that happen with emergency medicine. There is an interest in getting better, and it's just not a kind of throw everything out there. There's a process and a testing, and we're glad to be a part of that as a part of the Houston Fire Department.
I am too.
Yeah.
So I don't die. That's really impressive. So going a little bit further back, early in the creation of EMS within the Houston Fire Department,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed that there was some resistance on the part of firefighters,
Mm-hmm.
changing their title, becoming EMTs. Do you feel that the department has moved past that now?
I think so, because now in order to be certified as a firefighter, you have to have some form of emergency medical technician training. There's still some gaps because the perception is that you do a lot more when you're on the ambulance. You're going to make a lot more incidents. We do make more EMS, respond to more EMS calls than we do to fire calls. The work, that could be debatable. You know, you go on a fire scene, a 211 fire, you get over 60 firefighters on the scene for 3 or 4 hours. EMS call, you may have 2 for 45 minutes. But, you know, the calls are all treated the same. We respond with our best and do our best when we get there. But the perception, as well as the reality, that more calls are EMS. makes people a little bit more resistant to maybe going over to EMS or the EMS side.
Mhm.
But, it's just how you look at the glass, half full or half empty. As I said earlier, for me, it was job security. People need help, and I'm here to help them. And I'd rather go than someone that may not care that much. So.
Yeah, and you've been of a lot of help. So you answered the next question too, which was about the number of calls.
Okay.
EMS versus fires.
Yeah, it's about 85, 87% EMS
Wow.
to the fire.
And can you tell us about the evolution of the dispatch from the early days to the advent of 911 and then the consolidation of the call center functions?
Okay, yeah, when I actually moved to communications in 96. And from 96 on, I spent most of my time in communications. A little while I came out to work in recruiting. But then I wound up going back to communications before promoting to the command staff. Prior to 911, I don't have a whole lot of information. I mean, I guess you had to know what number to dial or dial 0, and the operator would get you there.
Yeah.
But 911, one of our executive assistant chiefs has a saying, whereas can you dial 3 numbers and get someone to respond, no questions asked, other than where are you and what's going on, and we respond. I think 911 helped people to realize how to get help quicker. I haven't looked at statistics on what was the survival rate prior to, but I don't think you can isolate the 911 piece from all the other medical advances we've made to say we're a lot better off. But I know in Houston, I only heard the stories prior to us getting EMS. It used to be the hearse or funeral homes that kind of ran the EMS, and they would pick people up. But I don't know I don't know if I'd like that. Are they hoping that I live or hoping that I'll be able to benefit them on the other side of business? So I wouldn't have liked that, and I'm glad I wasn't around for that era. But since I've been in the fire department, I've seen the evolution, seen it evolve from some or a lot of members in the department not even having an EMT certification to everyone having an EMT certification. There are very few members in the department that don't have at least that basic level of EMT certification. So in that sense, it's evolved a lot, and I don't see it ever going back to not having EMTs or not having people that could at least mitigate minor basic life support emergencies.
Yeah, it seems like common sense.
Yeah.
So how have the changes in the call center, how has that changed and improved the response time?
So before, having a computer-aided dispatch systems and algorithms that you can ask questions and a response become generated, you would have to, even locating the patient. Mm-hmm. They had cards, large files, and Rolodexes of looking up where an incident may be, and when you see where the incident is, there would be a large paper printout of what stations would respond or should respond to this emergency, which are the closest stations that should respond. So they had to look to the Rolodex, look at the map.
What's a Rolodex?
Rolodex, a large wheel of cards. You may see them on desks with A, B, C, D, and then you go to A and whatever letters are there. Well, they would have locations in this large Rolodex, and it would, for the address, it would show what stations should respond. If there's a call at 600 Jefferson, you look up 600 Jefferson and you'd see station 8, station 7, station. So you would have to manually do that. Well, with the computer age and integration, instead of doing that, when you type the address in, the computer will show you what stations should go to that location. Also, not only what stations should go, it allows us to pre-program who should respond to certain types of emergencies. Mm. For example, there's a stroke at 600 Jefferson. When you put that in the computer, you'll not only get the units that should respond, But we can also tell it what types of units to respond. If we have a stroke, we want to at least send one paramedic unit. We want to at least send one transport unit. And maybe you want 4 first responders. Well, the first 2 criteria could be met by 1 unit within the fire department, because we have paramedic squads, which are, it's 2 paramedics in a unit, but they don't have transport capability. We also have medic units with 2 paramedics, but it can transport. And we have basic life support units that can transport patients, but it's 2 EMTs. So all of those criteria can be put into a computer program, and it'll spit out who comes, opposed to manually looking up, okay, what's the closest station, and does that station have a paramedic in it? If it doesn't, what's the next station, and do they have a paramedic? So all of those things are calculated by a computer a lot faster than we could do it. Yeah. So in that sense, it allows us to get to people that have an emergency a lot quicker. That evolution over time has helped. It also allows pre-arrival instructions to be added to the call. So if there's a same scenario with a stroke patient, if there are some things we need to do, those things can be on the screen for a call taker to read off. Don't give them anything to eat or drink. Make sure they're not choking, open their airways, and just some real basic instructions on how to do those things. Gather the medicines that they may have. If you have a dog, lock it up so that won't be a hindrance when we get there. If you can unlock the door, those kind of things. So the computer age just speeds up everything like it does with anything else. It just allows us to do things a lot quicker.
Wow, that's really good. So what order of magnitude, or how much faster has this consolidation made the whole process? I think it's
seconds, but when you think about it, seconds here, seconds there, I think minutes with the look up in the Rolodex. We came light years a long way from that. But as we fine tune our protocols, as the medical director says, if he looks at what type of call was it, the questions that were asked and the response it generated, and then the disposition of the patient, and they analyze that data, it'll help us to get better. If we know a patient has had a stroke, do we need to waste 20 more seconds asking additional questions, or would those 20 more seconds get us a better response, a more appropriate response? So those types of analytics are made possible with the information that we have, because the data can be captured and analyzed. And as far as what makes it faster or not, I think that may come and go as now sometimes drinking coffee is good, and sometimes they say coffee is not good for you, right? So I think those types changes they affect us as well. So we do try to do what's best practices for our citizens and what's going to give them the best service.
That's awesome. We've literally talked about that now. So this goes a little bit broader. So since you have been a member of the department, and even more recently as chief, we have had a number of weather emergencies, which cause a lot of flooding, right? As well as events that drew thousands of visitors to the city, such as the conference that's happening right now and the NCAA Final Four. In your role as fire chief, how do you coordinate your efforts with the fire department and other services to assure, to make sure that the emergency efforts are in place should anything happen, and when it does happen?
Our greatest resource, the greatest resource of the Houston Fire Department, are the people that work in it. We have amazing people here, and a lot of them came for the same reason I did, because they want to help people. And no matter what the situation or how big the circumstance, and sometimes even how much we complain, they're going to do whatever it takes to get the job done. We do as best we can to plan for large-scale events and emergencies, and a lot of times we may not have the resources to complete the mission or do the best job for the mission. For example, you mentioned flooding. We have boats, rescue boats, and evacuation boats, but we don't have high water vehicles. The police department has gotten some from grant funds. The Public Works Department has them because that's the equipment they work with every day. So we have to partner with our other departments within the city to complete the job. And thankfully, they have really good people there too. They're responsive, and they have the spirit of most Houstonians, and that is to help each other. Yeah. And it not only as citizens who don't work for the city, but as city employees, there's a sense of community, and we get together and we get it done. And there's a lot of planning that goes into large-scale events, Super Bowl, NCAA. We work with the police department, not only for the city, but sheriff's department and as many law enforcement and traffic mobility teams, the public works for keeping things clean, making sure there are enough porta potties, and it's a huge undertaking whenever these events come to town. We're not always doing all the work. Sometimes we can be highlighted if something goes wrong, right. But the number of people that it takes to pull these things off, you'd be surprised. And all of the level of detail, there's no way I could think of it. That's why I rely on those people and all of the partnerships that we have to get it done.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So we have a wide variety of emergency situations to prepare for. Whether on the water or in a high-rise, at the airports, chemical plants, or ships at the Port of Houston. How does the department handle training for these varied situations? And is everyone trained to respond in each area generally, or is it like specific units that are trained for different things? That
question was almost tailored for our department. Okay. So we have a special operations group, or the Aircraft Fire Rescue. They take care of everything at the airports. We have technical rescue teams that handle high-rise trench rescues, which are below ground, as well as high-angle window washers, crane operators, swift water rescues. We have a technical rescue team that has extensive training in that. We have a hazmat team, and they take care of chemical emergencies. They have more equipment, higher level of training, and even some more protective suits to deal with chemical emergencies. So our special, we call them special operations teams, have higher, people trained to higher levels than our basic firefighter. But as a basic firefighter, you are trained in, you do get some hazmat training, you do get some rescue, rope training, knots, and you get to rappel. You get a little bit of aircraft training, but thankfully our department is fortunate enough to have enough members to put in all of these areas. Yeah. The aircraft rescue firefighters, actually the FAA and the airport system takes care of most of their expenses and the equipment, because their equipment is a lot different than what you see on the street, where we get out and fight the fire. On the aircraft firefighters, they sit in the truck and spray the foam. It's a whole different level of firefighting. And to train everyone to that level would be quite expensive, and it would be something that they don't use all the time. There are regulations by the FAA on how much training they have to have, and their live burns. And so we do have a special group that handles all of the aircraft emergencies as well as rescue. We have a special group for them too, because they have to get swift water boat training, training on extricating from vehicles, a little bit more extensive training on high angle rescues with ropes and rappelling and extracting people from uncomfortable places. So, and hazardous material as well. We have to be up on chemicals, how to treat them, what to do with them, what to look out for, working the equipment to measure levels of toxicity. So we're fortunate enough to have all those specialty groups, as well as the basic training that we have, and the stations around, say our hazmat station is on the southeast side where most of our chemical things happen. Yeah. Sometimes the stations close to them, they work with them, as well as the Channel Industries Mutual Aid Group, to do some specialized training on the hazards that they may face in those areas. So that's how we get it done. It's a spreading the love on all the special things, but some of it we have to keep kind of close so we can have the people that are trained and deal with it on a day in and day out basis, so they're more familiar and have a little bit better level of expertise.
Absolutely. Wow, that's more training than I ever thought needed to go into it. But that's awesome. In 1982, Houston appointed Chief Lee Brown as chief of police, the first African American to hold that position in Houston. Over 30 years later, what would it mean to you to be the first person who breaks that barrier for Houston Fire Department?
It would be a really, really nice thing to do. It would show that hard work, dedication, I think a lack of bitterness, and wanting to get the job done really does pay off and make a difference. Positions of directors and things like that within the city, they seem to be really political. Yeah. And coming into the fire department, one of the guys told me, I said, I'm not a political person. He said, in this job you will be. And I never looked at it like that, and I think that was because of my upbringing. Yeah. I practice relational management because I feel like if you can relate to people, you have a relationship, and you care about their well-being, then everything else will fall into place. So I feel like I would be good for the city. If I'm not selected, I'm going to support whoever is selected so that they can be good for the city. I had the pleasure of meeting several of there was a class of 10 African Americans that came into the fire department in 1955. So that was the first African Americans ever allowed in the Houston Fire Department. When you think about 55, it wasn't that long ago. But they were the first to come into the department. And a few weeks ago, we got a call that one of those members, Captain Bright, was in hospice and going to pass away. So had a chance to visit him, and his mind was still very sharp at the time. And I had a chance to ask him, what was his toughest obstacle? And coming into the department, and he said, getting into the department, I was looking for a job to take care of my family. And the department afforded me that opportunity. And the things that he said were hard were the things that were hard on the job. He mentioned the Woodway Square fire, which was a pretty significant fire in the city of Houston. So significant that there was an ordinance to change wood shingle roofs because it seemed like the world was on fire when Woodway was burning. And he talked about the tough tasks that he had on the job, but he didn't mention the struggles that he had personally because of how he looked on the job, or because of his race. And I think for me, I've seen people have some challenges, and they could have very well had to do with race or gender or sexual origin. But I've encouraged those people to do the best they can wherever they are. And most of the time, doing the right thing will prevail. So, I would be very appreciative. And I know I would, the community would be appreciative too to see that the city is progressive enough to look past whatever the perception may be and pick the best person for the job. And if that happens to be me, then I would love to serve. If they choose someone else and that person is the best person, it'll be my job at that time to make sure that they are the best person for the job and that the job that they do is appreciated. Keep them from stepping into landmines, some of them that I may have already stepped on. But it would just be my job at that time to support. And I'm comfortable with either role.
That's perfect. I want you to work for me.
Yeah.
So what steps is the department taking today to continue hiring and promoting all types of diverse people married in that?
Oh, well, right now, the big thing with fire service, it has been predominantly a male-dominated profession. And in the city of Houston, that's been Caucasian male. What we are doing recruiting-wise is going into schools, HISD schools, as well as Fort Bend, Galena Park, I think it is also. And we have a program called Casey Club, and it's a mentoring program for youth. We spend time talking to them about things in the fire service, some safety tips, some things we do to protect ourselves, and And the program runs, I think, a semester at a time, 12 or 16 weeks. They have a graduation. We expose them to a physical ability test, what you would have to do to pass to get into the fire department. So it exposes them to a career in the fire department.
Yeah.
The other thing we're doing, we've partnered with HISD and Lone Star College to have a curriculum put into the schools where kids can graduate with a certification as a firefighter and EMT. And with that certification, they can go immediately and apply for most departments in Texas, including the Houston Fire Department. We figure if we can educate people young and catch them before they get in trouble, that's a great way to give them an opportunity to come in. Classified recruiting is not within the fire department, but again, another one of those city partnerships. And they go out and they recruit at community college, military bases. The HBUs are historically black universities. They'll recruit there to get the numbers up. We have a weekend training program for women where they're allowed to come out, I think it's 1 weekend a month, and practice on a physical ability test, because that's one of the things that's tough for women to overcome. So we've done some things to provide opportunities. Can we do more? Yes, but those are some of the things we're doing on the hiring side. On the promotion side, unfortunately, changes came through lawsuits where the disparate impact might have been proven and promotional system changes were forced on us as far as assessment centers, going away from strictly a purely written test to implement some elements of assessment, where they're given a scenario and people are asked to explain what they would do, what actions they would take, or write out what actions they would do or take with a real life scenario. Yeah. Because the written test was perceived as, hey, if you can read it and remember it, you got it and you can promote. But that doesn't speak to leadership. That doesn't speak to anything that you would have to do in an intense situation. And it doesn't speak to how you deal with people and personnel issues because you can read and remember and put it down on paper. So that was a lawsuit, and I'm not sure what year it was actually won, but we've had 2 assessment centers, and it's not for every rank. It was the captain and senior captain in emergency operations, which is only one branch of the department. Those are the guys that are on the street, but there's also a communications branch, inspection, and arson that people can promote to. Those areas do not have assessment centers, but those areas are much more diverse than the rank structure in emergency operations. So that's kind of how that piece for diversity on promoting. Now appointments, that's up to the fire chief, and they can appoint a diverse group of command staff based on the most qualified people, but usually there are qualified people in all walks of life. It's just a matter of getting an opportunity. One of the things we do outside of promotion is to provide opportunities to those areas of special operations that we talked about earlier, ORF, rescue, hazmat. We take applications and we don't just pick the same old folk all the time. Get a diverse group of folk to train, and as we all work together and become better together and become better trained, then it gives them either the drive or the opportunity to be exposed to things that'll make them want to promote. So those are the internal things that we can do for promotions.
That's excellent. So this is totally just in your opinion.
Okay.
So what is the most memorable story you've had in the fire department and EMS?
I've had, for me,
Your blank check.
EMS. I know it's really blank. I think the most memorable thing, something that brought it home to me, before I had kids, I would make emergencies with children, and they meant something but not the same. So the first emergency I made after I had a child was a kid that had cradle cap, and it's kind of like real bad drying of the scalp. And the cradle cap was so bad it went down her neck. So I was like, wow, people have kids, and I don't think everyone wants to abuse their children, but sometimes they just don't know any better. That was enlightening to me, and it gave me, I guess, the freedom to talk to people about the situations that they find themselves in, not to scold them, but to leave them in better shape than I found them, not just medically, but mentally, on how they can make their lives better. And I've not only externally with patients, but internally with members of the fire department. I think it's important for them to know how not only to advance their careers, but how to make their lives better. And my first captain in the fire department, Captain Lewis Moore, he asked me, when I get into the department, he definitely made sure you're going to read a guideline every day, you're going to learn your territory so you know where you're going. But he made sure I put some money in deferred compensation. Why was he talking to me about deferred compensation or putting money away for the future? At 20 years old, I wasn't thinking about that, but he instilled that in me. And it's something that I hold on to today, making sure that people take care of their lives. If their lives are good, when they come in, they can better serve other people. But if they show up here with a lot of problems and we wind up working to help them mitigate those problems, or having to discipline them because those problems translate over into poor performance, then we failed. Not only the citizens that they're serving, but we failed them. So that experience of seeing people and understanding that they're not doing it. Sometimes they do it because they just don't know better. And ignorance isn't a crime, but I think it's a crime to leave people in that state.
Man, you really did read the questions. There are two more that I'd come up with on my own.
Okay.
That relate, again, like I said, to the leadership. So, man, this is really good. Just all the stuff you said is really, really wise. This is stuff that you don't see in a lot of organizations, specifically making sure that people are okay at home.
Yeah.
So dealing with the stresses of the job, you mentioned your when you had children, that became a little bit more real to you.
Mm-hmm.
What stresses did you feel from the work with EMS? And then, so there are three questions. What stresses are there?
Okay.
The second question is, how did you deal with them? And the third is, how did you help your people? Help the firefighters, help the EMTs, how did you help them? And do you still today help them deal with it? Because, I mean, to be honest, the stresses are pretty intense.
Sure.
You know, we're not designing children's toys or, anything like that. I mean, these are people's lives.
Yeah. So as I progressed in my career, my role changed. When you talk about stress, the sheer number of runs or incidents that we respond to can be very stressful for people. We work a 24-hour shift, and it could be, 2 in the morning and you haven't had a lot of sleep. That can be quite stressful on some people. We have, one of our paths of entry is if you have 2 years of military service. Being in a war for 12 years, we get a lot of veterans that already have maybe some post-traumatic stress issues. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to do in a leadership role, not as chief, was to work on getting a second staff psychologist on board to help our members who are suffering from post-traumatic stress, probably from just the emergencies that they see on the street. We live in an age now, and you told me you were 26. You may understand that you're going to see when you take this job, you're going to see some scenes that are kind of gruesome, but you may not understand the things that come along with it. You may not understand that when you go in a house and a baby has died from sudden infant death syndrome, how the family's going to be reacting, what they're going to want you to do when you know there's nothing you can do. How do you deal with those outside stresses from a screaming mother, a disappointed son or brother or father, and they want you to do something? Those are things that I think a lot of members have come into the department. They understand they're going to have to deal with the patient, but it's the outside things. I don't want to call them distractors, but they're extensions of the emergency. So I'd like to help a little bit better with that. But one of the things we did do to help people with stress was get a second staff psychologist on board. We also have what's called a critical incident stress management team. And those are members of the department that receive some specialized training in dealing with stressful situations and people who have dealt with those situations. This team does not just treat people who have an issue with what they see on the job, but we've actually had to make interventions with people away from the job who suffer for whatever reason, depression, substance abuse, or wherever they're having a problem. We have these psychologists and this team of people that will reach out to them and help them to deal with the stresses. Me personally, I guess I have a release. I tell you, my dad was a pastor a long time, so a lot of things I know are not in my control anyway. And I think stress comes from feeling like you have to control certain things. I don't believe that I'm in total control of everything. I know that by the storm that just came, by the amount of water that fell, by the people that were displaced, by the fact that even with deploying all the resources we had, there are still people upset because we didn't get to you in a timely manner. We just don't control everything. But if you internalize that and make it your fault, per se, it can be really stressful. And I'm not saying I never get stressed, because when we fail or when I think about I could have did something different, that can be a little bit stressful. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily how it affects me, but how other people have been affected, especially if it was negative. If they get the wrong idea and I don't get an opportunity to tell them what I really mean, sometimes that's a little stressful. But even that I can't control. Just have to give myself a little time to get over it. I don't know if I got all three of your questions with that.
Yeah, I think you did. Going more again to the other people that you help lead.
Okay.
You said that you help them take care of things like financial things at home. Yeah. You have you have a psychologist. It sounds like 2 psychologists.
We have 2 staff psychologists. We have some fellows also, and people that want to come in and work with our psychologists. We've started doing some research. We've worked with the University of Houston to do some of that research. And it's not there, I guess there is training, but dealing with, say, post-traumatic stress, where do you go to deal with it? And the fire department is maybe perfect training ground for that, but a lot of fire departments have not embraced the fact that their members have it. It's a macho profession. So to be stressed about the things that you should be able to handle may not be perceived as cool or kosher. So we're trying to meet that however we can. They don't have to tell us, and a lot of the treatment that's going on, I don't need to know that who it is or whatever, but I do like to know what percentage of our people are having a problem, and that they're getting help, whether it's through our psychologists, through the city's EAP, Employee Assistance Program, or through the healthcare providers that we have, making sure that they do have something in our healthcare package that will treat a mental illness or these types of things, post-traumatic stress.
That's really good. A lot of the other people we've interviewed talked about the fire department as a family. Would you say that that's inaccurate?
I think it is most of the time, and that's relative. Family is relative because, there are all kinds of families, broken, some that are really close, some that are estranged. For the most part, the members in the department will do anything they can to help each other. There are sometimes lines, dividing lines when it comes to agendas. But for the most part, it is a family atmosphere. You live with people for 24 hours at a time, most of the time. So you have to have a lot of trust in them. You're dealing with life and death situations, immediately danger to life and health circumstances. So you have to have a lot of trust in the person that's next to you, their training, their ability to stay with you. So yes, it's a family atmosphere. But you know, again, there are different levels of family, and some fight more than others. Just being realistic, but it's the closest thing you're gonna get when you live with somebody, your family. And we do live together. We fight together. We defend together, and we help people together. And sometimes we wind up helping each other. So yes, it's very much family atmosphere.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And that's all the questions that we have. Is there
Okay.
anything you'd like to tell us we feel we maybe glossed over?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you for highlighting positive things about this profession, about EMS. The unfortunate thing is a lot of people won't read it. There are a lot of great things out there that I haven't read. And I probably would like to, but I haven't. But I'm just thankful for you guys, the media, the outlet that you're providing to get something positive out about the department. I'm just really appreciative of that.
Well, no problem. It's been a pleasure to learn and to do it all.
Okay, you're welcome. I know I'm not the EMS person, but hey, I hope I helped. I don't know if we even talked about EMS a whole lot, but maybe enough. Maybe you can put together a story from it. I mean, that's what journalists do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
You have anything?